There's a reason why this Indian team heading into the World Cup is the best one that we've seen yet.
This Indian team has a lot of expectations on their shoulder, not only because of the fact that the World Cup is at home, but this is also one of the best Indian teams heading into the World Cup. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the 2017 World Cup where we made it into the final, and if you look at the journey to the 2025 World Cup, you can find a lot of similarities. But of course, there was a World Cup in between, the 2021-22 World Cup, where there was a blip where we couldn't even qualify to the semi-finals. And this is exactly what we're going to look into, the similarities and differences and why this Indian team has the winning formula to go not only until the final but also win the World Cup. Now, before we look at the numbers and what's similar and what's different, hit that subscribe button, and here's also a promo from our membership. In the last 15 years, this 5 years have been the toughest period to bat in India.
Yeah, just the New Zealand series is where the New Zealand batters averaged more against spin than us.
The first time in 12 years where an opposition batters have outperformed the Indian batters playing against spin.
It's just tougher for a batter because there are bigger zones outside that Goldilocks zone that are now tougher to bat against. You just don't know what to line up for.
But it just goes to show that playing field has decreased for the Indian team in terms of having an advantage.
I think they should just play normal good cricketing wickets and they'll win matches. They have the pedigree. Now, for the sake of this analysis, we are going to have some standardized templates in which we move forward. What we're going to be looking at is the 2017 World Cup, the 2022 World Cup, and the 2025 World Cup. Now, in each of these World Cups, we look at India's performance 1 year prior to the tournament and also how India have done in the tournament itself. We look especially at the batting orders and how many players have been tried, and from there we also look at the bowling and also how these players have fared in that 1 year and also then in the World Cup. Starting off with the 2017 World Cup, it is no surprise that a lot of people remember this World Cup because of the brand of cricket that India played and the fact that they were able to defeat Australia in the semis and reach the final. And when you also look at the numbers in the build-up in the past 1 year before this World Cup happened, you will understand why this team going into the World Cup was so confident. Through that 1 year, Indian batters averaged 43.5, which in the world for that year was the highest. Not only that, they also struck at 72.7, which was the fourth highest strike rate during that period. This was the period where the likes of Deepti Sharma, Mithali Raj and Poonam Raut were all having really good stints with the bat, and you also know that they batted across the batting order. You had Poonam Raut at the top of the order, you had Deepti Sharma and Mithali Raj in the middle, and so it made sense that this Indian batting order at the time was doing well. But while India has always been known to be a good batting side, what was a great switch was also the fact that our bowlers at this point were doing extremely well. In that past year, India had a bowling average of 18.6, which at the time was the second best bowling average in the world for that year. Not only that, this coupled with the fact that they had an economy rate of just 3.1 meant that the Indian batters were doing well, but also the bowlers were able to get wickets consistently and restrict their oppositions.
This is why we break things down even further and look at our batting order, because that substantially changed to what it was to what it currently is in 2025. If you look at the top order, and that's openers and the number 3 spot, there were 5 openers tried leading up to the 2017 World Cup, but in the top order itself, there were 9 players tried in total. This says a couple of things. For 3 positions, the fact that there were 9 players tried out leading up to the World Cup, the Indian team was still unsure of their openers and the number 3 spot, and this is not exactly how you want to get into the World Cup. But even through all of this, we had a fantastic average in the opening stand because we averaged 51 as the opening partnership with a strike rate of 71.2. What was more concerning at that point, without thinking about how far we went into the World Cup in retrospect, India's first World Cup game saw 2 openers who hadn't opened together at all leading up to the World Cup. Even though we had tried different opening combinations, Poonam Raut and Smriti Mandhana hadn't opened until that point. That being said, they had a disappointing World Cup because they only averaged 22 with the bat. And throughout that World Cup, no player had a fixed number 3 spot because Mithali Raj and Deepti Sharma kept exchanging places, which goes to show somewhat an instability in the top 3. Now here's the problem, right? If you look at the number 3 batters that India tried at the time, Mithali Raj, the captain, had a strike rate of about 70, and Deepti Sharma, who was another option, struck at only 59. But the positive is that we had balance in the squad because Deepti Sharma, who was tried at number 3 and continued to bat in the middle order, was also the highest wicket taker. So the fact that we had a bowler who could take wickets for the Indian team was also able to contribute a lot of runs with the bat.
Now for the middle order in the positions of 4 to 7, 10 players were tried in the 1 year leading up to the World Cup. They averaged 43.7, which in the world for that duration was the best average for any team. But not only that, they also struck at 76.5, which was then the 4th highest strike rate for any team's middle order. And with the middle order performing this well going into the World Cup, you would expect a lot more from them. In fact, it it is in some sense very similar to the 2025 World Cup, where once again in the lead up to the World Cup, we've had a good middle order showing. However, this is where India in some sense were let down, because when you come to the World Cup, their numbers drop a bit. While the middle order did strike at 83.7, which was higher than the past 1 year, they struggled to get runs consistently. With an average of just 29.2, their average had definitely dropped from the past 1 year, and this caused a lot of problems. Also, why a lot of times it was India's openers or someone from the lower order who was bailing us out.
Now, if you look at the performance with the ball, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the performance in the World Cup was not as great as the performance leading up to the World Cup. We averaged 27 with the ball and had an economy of just 4.4. Now, something to keep in mind that our numbers leading up to the World Cup in any case are inflated, because in the 1 year until the World Cup, we hadn't played sides like England and Australia at all.
The 2022 World Cup was one that a lot of us fans would want to forget. India did not have a great showing, and in fact only won 3 out of the 7 games that they played in that World Cup. In the lead up to that World Cup was also one of India's most terrible 1 year periods, as they went on to barely win any games of cricket. Even beyond that, if you look specifically at their batting and bowling, both of it was extremely bad. In this period, our batters averaged 28.6 and struck at just 74.4. And while this still meant that in terms of batting average, we were 5th highest in the world, and in terms of the strike rate, we were the 4th best in the world. But when it came to our bowling, this is one of the worst periods of bowling that we've seen from an Indian side in the recent past. We were struggling to take wickets consistently, and this is reflective in the bowling average of just 41.8. In fact, we were so bad that India was 9th in the world in terms of bowling averages for that 1 year, and we were better only than Zimbabwe. We were also a lot more expensive than the previous cycle, with an economy rate on average of 5.1. This too was better only than the New Zealand bowlers. Of course, India did not have a lot of cricket in the lead up to this World Cup as well, because of COVID and everything around that, but it also signified a definite shift in the kind of cricket that teams were playing. At least top teams like in Australia or England were a lot more aggressive in their approach, and the Indian bowlers were struggling to keep up with this pace.
And this is where once again we look at the batting order, especially the top order. Leading up to the World Cup as compared to 2017, there are similar numbers. We have tried 5 openers and 9 players in total in the top 3 spot. But this time around, our opening stand had a terrible average leading up to the World Cup. We only averaged 28 and struck at 81. Even though our strike rate is sort of impressive, the average is abysmal. And because of this uncertainty, even during the World Cup, we tried different opening combinations. A total of 3 players were tried in the opening spot. With Smriti Mandana being the constant, there was a tussle between Shefali Verma and Yastika Bhatia, but there was a problem because both of these openers were completely out of form. Even though Shefali Verma struck at 97, she only averaged 26. And when it comes to Yastika Bhatia, even though she had 250s in the tournament, she only averaged 29, but this is where the problem began because she only struck at 69. And because of all of this, even the number 3 spot was an uncertainty because 3 players during the tournament were tried at number 3.
The middle order more or less stayed consistent both in the World Cup and the year just leading up to the World Cup. Although we did try 10 players, our middle order still did well in the year leading up to the World Cup with an average of 35 and a strike rate of 75. In fact, our middle order in terms of their batting average was the 2nd highest in the world during this period. And in terms of the strike rate, they were the 4th best. And so it was a case once again where India's middle order heading into a World Cup was looking strong. But come the World Cup, although they performed decently, they did not perform well enough. With an average of 28.1 and a strike rate of 76.9, the middle order did not live up to the hype that they had been able to generate in the year leading up to that World Cup. Apart from Harmanpreet Kaur, the rest of the middle order seemed to struggle, with Mithali Raj and Richa Ghosh, both of them not really getting a lot of runs and also were not consistent enough. This is also why this was a World Cup where, although the Indian middle order struggled, we were seeing performances from someone like Pooja Vasrakar or Sneh Rana who would come in the lower order and save India in a couple of matches. And honestly, this was the biggest letdown for us in that World Cup because there were a lot of situations where India could have been winning a lot more matches. However, the middle order just failed to step up consistently, and it was just a one-woman show with Harmanpreet Kaur showing the way to our Indian batters.
This was that kind of World Cup where our batters just failed to score any runs and failed the team because our bowlers, even though heading into the World Cup we were almost the worst bowling side, by the end of that World Cup we were one of the best. We had the best bowling average of just 27 and an economy of 4.4, which was the 3rd best in the World Cup.
That brings us to the current situation in the 2025 World Cup. Now, we've done a lot of videos on this and we've talked about the Indian team at length, but once again to summarize, this has easily been one of the best Indian teams in terms of their strength coming into a tournament like the World Cup. Of course, there is a little bit of inexperience in the bowling, but our batters have been on fire. This is also reflective in our batting average of 35.2, which is the highest in the last 1 year. But the biggest change has been India's ability to strike big. With an average strike rate of 93.4, this is the second highest strike rate in this period, and it shows that India is finally coming to terms with how fast the game is moving forward. In fact, in 2024 and 2025, India have had their two best scoring rates ever in the history of their ODI cricket. With a runs per over of 6.36 coming into 2025, India have definitely shown that at the batting front of things, they've been able to adapt their game beautifully and take it a notch to the next level. With the ball, however, it hasn't necessarily been the same story. India being plagued by injuries in this period has meant that in the last 1 year, they've still been finding their feet with the kind of pace attack they have, and also to some extent with the spinners. With a bowling average of 32.4, which is the 10th highest in this period, India has not been consistently picking up wickets, but that's something that has also improved over time. And in this high scoring period, Indian bowlers have an economy rate of 5.3. When you look back at the 2022 World Cup and the period before that, where Indian bowlers went at an economy of 5.1, when you look at it from that perspective, it seems that India have still been able to manage their bowling lineup well and not gone for way too many runs. But the other side also is that they haven't been the most economical, and this hurts us, especially because we're not able to get wickets consistently.
Now, this up in strike rate and averages is also reflected in the batting order, especially the top three. We've tried 5 different openers and 7 different players in the top 3, but something you can rely on is the fact that for the most part of this year, and that is 17 matches in total, Smriti Mandhana and Pratik Rawal have opened for the Indian team, being one of the most, if not the most successful opening partners for the Indian team in the ODI format. The openers have averaged 49 as partners, which is the second best leading up to the World Cup, but more impressively, we have struck at 96. And even though for the most part the number 3 spot was an uncertainty, Harleen Deol was given a go and has been consistently given a go at this spot and even during the World Cup itself.
In the middle order, 11 players have been tried in the lead up to the World Cup. From positions 4 to 7, you know that it's mostly been locked, but India has not only had injuries, but they've also wanted to try a lot of batters in this position. Eventually, it's worked out because India not only have the second best average, but also the second highest strike rate in the world in the last 1 year. Averaging 36.1 and striking at 100.7, this middle order has been revolutionary from an Indian standpoint. Not only is this the most explosive middle order from India ever going into a World Cup, but they're also one of the more consistent ones. With the likes of Harmanpreet Kaur, Jemimah Rodrigues, Richa Ghosh and Deepti Sharma finally locking down those 4 positions, their dynamism and how they approach the game augurs really well for India. While you have players who can play the role of accumulators, you also have the likes of Jemimah Rodrigues and Richa Ghosh who can come in and take the attack to the opposition. All this, along with the fact that they've bailed out India multiple times in important and crucial chases, means that they are the all-round package for India in terms of their middle order going into this World Cup.
Now, something very interesting, and this is why you have a little more context, is the fact that if you look at the opening bowlers tried and tested before every World Cup, it has only increased over time. We went from 6 in 2017 to 8 in 2022 to now 10 opening bowlers in 2025. And this is because a lot of our fast bowlers, especially the experienced ones, have been injured coming into this World Cup. And so as much as we have really improved with the bat and caught up to the pace of the game, this is still a concern and will be a concern continuing in this World Cup. But something to keep in mind, and something a lot of people have pointed out, is going back to the old habits. Like we talked about in the 2022 World Cup, where Mithali Raj and Deepti Sharma were at the number 3 not striking big, a lot of people use that example to criticize Harleen Deol batting at number 3 not being able to strike big. What will be important to see, and one of the most important decisions, is the fact that if Harleen Deol continues to bat slow and is not able to score big, will Harmanpreet Kaur in the middle of the World Cup make a change at the number 3 spot? But the fact that if you look at the 15, we have replacements for almost each and every spot, and it's one of the most balanced squad heading into this World Cup, you will really hold on to the hope that they can go on and win this. Now, this has been a video for why this team is so well balanced and what's different as compared to the last 2 World Cups. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff. All of our links are in the description below. If you haven't followed us on our socials, do that too. And if you think about being a member, do that too. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.